Need high-quality video to promote your event, business, or band? We can help.
We're Pixel Pond, a video production team based in the Pacific Northwest, providing high-quality content to clients across the U.S. and Canada.
Whether you want coverage of your live event to promote for next year, or need a camera and a camera operator for your next big project, we can accommodate projects of all sizes.
Your story is important. Visit pixelpondllc.com or send an email to info@pixelpondllc.com to get started today. We can't wait to work with you.
This time on Gamers Week podcast. Game Informer is back, and so is its entire staff. The outlet is now backed by the blockchain developer Gunzilla Games. The developer behind... Nope, that doesn't count. Does not count.
Yes, it does.
Developer behind the upcoming NFT Battle Royale off the grid. Why Game Informer? Why not something like Electronic Gaming Monthly or GamePro?
Nobody remembers those the way they remember Game Informer.
I beg to differ. I still remember GamePro and Electronic Gaming Monthly,
old.
and I prefer them over Game Informer.
But we're old. We are not the target audience for Off the Grid.
Damn kids. Kakalakoa says maybe they were just looking to licky boom boom down.
Game Informer.
Licky boom boom down. See, now your right blinker fluid, now that's full, but your left blinker fluid, you got to port low on that one, man. You really gotta try our package now. We're gonna fill you right up.
You're going to fill me right up with your package.
Hello.
Oh, wow. And on that note,
Nice transition.
Hey, it's not every day you can make Donnie blush, so I'll take that.
The cheeks are, red and hurting right now. Hi, everybody.
He's not talking about the ones on his face.
No. Wait a second. Man, my cheeks are hurting, and oh, God, they're red.
It's like how you woke up after Southern Fried the first night.
Yeah, but then the next night it was your turn. Shared everything.
It's nice that you guys swap.
Yeah. Well, with that being said, let's start off the episode. Welcome to Gamers Week Podcast. And like the name says, we analyze the best, worst, and weirdest headlines of the past week in the video game industry. This is episode 158, and today is Wednesday, March 26th, 2025. My name is donniegretro, and I will be your host this evening, but I am not alone. I have my two gracious co-hosts with me. My first co-host keeps a huge bottle of lotion on her desk for her weekday work meetings, but it's okay. It's just for aesthetics. Wink. And you can see that right in the background right there. Say hello, everybody, to Blue Williams, a.k.a. Writer's View. Blue, how are you doing this evening?
I actually keep worse things displayed on that desk, but you can't see them. They're just out of the frame. So
now you did have a little doll for a while there.
I had the Caucasaurus Rex, remember? But I'm not going to show him on this one. That'll get us a TOS violation. But I did show you guys a picture.
Yes, you did.
The shaft, and he's got the little arms and the legs. Big head, little arms, kind of a thing. Simon wants to know, does Blue keep a voodoo doll of the two of you? Now that you mention it.
Man, stop giving her ideas.
And if you see my second co-host walking around in a huge diaper and his man boob showing, don't be alarmed. It's not what you think. He's dying to become a sumo wrestler. Ladies and gentlemen, say hello and a good evening to Ryan Payne, a.k.a. retrogamebrews.
Yeah, before I got out of here, I did like to ward off the evil spirits,
Morton salt and put it in your hand and just throw it. Who's the dead man who threw the salt shaker? All right, let's go ahead and jump into our reviews, reactions, and requests. Sanity Crypto says, I got it. Blue's Pimp Daddy name should be Steel Cut Sausage. What?
I don't hate it.
Isn't there something called Steel Cut Oats?
Yeah.
So now you have Steel Cut Sausage?
I think you're thinking too hard about it.
Yeah, sorry.
Your Pimp Daddy name is just something that evokes an emotion. It doesn't have to make sense.
Duly noted. Next up, Tesseract Unfold says, tasting things in VR, I have 3 words for you. Resident Evil 7.
That kind of opening scene where you first meet the family and it's dinner time.
Oh, that's with the hillbillies, isn't it?
Yeah.
I didn't play that one. And I don't want to, please
You're gonna like
don't go into detail on what that is.
Can we get Donnie to gag tonight?
No, you probably could.
100% think he's going to gag in that game, though.
And other places. Last but not least, Shuiwan Su Guru Maru says, right in your most sensitive areas. And I do have a lot of sensitive areas.
Pump those hydrogels in there.
He's talking about his perineum.
I massage my perineum daily. I do. Otherwise, what's the medical term for it is the gooch.
That's the medical term, not perineum. It's
the gooch.
I'm also a fan of the grundle, which is another version
grundle.
of that. Yep.
Yeah.
No. Is it really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, no.
Do you have enough? Tell me you have a different context in which you've used the grundle, please.
So, in the 80s, there was a feature-length animated movie of the My Little Ponies.
This is not where I thought it was going, but continue.
That's what makes it better. And throughout their adventure, they're trying to stop this evil witch who has recruited this creature called the Smooze, which is essentially like sentient purple slime that's covering the whole world and making everything bad. And so they go on this journey to find help, and they come across these little like troll people, and they're called the Grundles. And their swear word for everything when they don't like something, they say Grundlenumph.
Grundlenumph.
Yes, pretty much. So my sisters and I, our entire lives, have quoted that when we don't like something, like Grundlenumph. So
just throw in like a taint nump next time, so that everybody's on the same page.
Real unfortunate.
So when did that movie come out?
80 something.
Because here's the problem. Purple slime, pink slime, making people bad. Did Ghostbusters 2 rip off My Little Pony?
Well, if you look, Frank said there is a villain in the real Ghostbusters called the Grundle. Ooh, we've got like an entire cross-pollination thing here happening.
1986, My Little Pony, the movie.
The movie.
Oh, no.
The movie.
Everything I knew about Ghostbusters 2 is a lie. Rip-offs.
I'm going to do a Nostalgia 101 where we compare the two movies.
That would require us to watch My Little Pony, and I don't want to do that.
I wonder how it holds up. God, I loved that movie when I was 5.
All right, let's move on to our patron shout-outs for the week.
All right, so we couldn't do what we do without the help of our gorgeous patrons. Here are the generous folks supporting Gamers Week on Patreon. Terry Kinnair, Agale3030, Don't Make Me Pull This Car Over, Games of Coffee, Hybrid Divide, You Fall Before Me, Davey PGH, The Pixel Pond family, including Shannon and Luke, Zach Huge Thanks, Puzzle Butter, Number One Blue Six Voice Fan, John Barron, Sony, President of the Nip Nip Fan Club, Evil Lust, Rai's Secret Best Friend, Mega Retro Man, Gamatroid, Mora Deeb, Michael, the football team at my high school, they were tough. After they sacked the quarterback, they went after his family, like Kite. Emo S, Bill Tucker, The Real Retro Game Brews, Fruitcakes Pickled Pepper, Ducks with Thick Thighs, Absolutely the Best Podcast, a work in progress, Wizard of Zardoz, Bobson Dugnut, Blues Little Sis, Loudmouth, Retro Blast Pat, B&T Zilla Guy, The Mad Milkman, Seven Castle Forest, Crunchy Kong, Sheriff Snacks, Frank Grande, Love Retro BTW, Steven Sand, and Ramboski. you like what you hear today, we really hope that you do. Please consider joining us on Patreon. Your support helps cover the cost of producing the show, as well as other cool stuff we'll be doing like prizes and giveaways. You also gain access to our bi-weekly patron-only bonus cast called Gamers Week Uncut. Patrons with benefits. Visit patreon.com/gamersweek or follow the link in the show notes.
Michael LeKite has informed me that this is the last of the Rodney Dangerfield name series. So that's why I had to make sure Ryan got his chance.
These things are making me laugh. So please keep doing them. Don't stop.
Don't stop. Just a little longer.
Just a little bit longer. All right, let's go ahead and jump into our headlines this week.
All right, our headline segment is proudly sponsored by the Retro Game Club podcast. It's a fantastic, family-friendly retro gaming podcast. In each episode, Rob picks 2 games to play and discuss, as well as news, interviews, and other topics. Right now, they want to know, what's a game you've already played that you wish you could experience again for the first time all over? And special thanks to Starsky in the RGC Discord for the question. Visit them at retrogameclub.net or follow the link in the show notes.
There are so many answers to this question.
Of course.
I don't know if I can narrow it down to just one.
Here's my thought on it. I don't have any that I would like to play again for the first time. Because I tend to think that when a game really speaks to you, it is a combination of both the game and where you are in your life at that time. So if you try to experience it at a different point in your life, it may not hit the same. And then you'll lose that touching experience that you had.
That's a really good point, because I don't know how many times you've said to somebody, try this game because you loved it and maybe because it hit at the right time, and then they play it and they're like, yeah, I guess it's okay.
Yeah.
Final Fantasy VII.
Yeah. Or you go back to play that game again and you're like, this was better, back then.
Yeah, the last time, right?
The last time. Yeah.
So that's an excellent point.
Going back and playing the original Final Fantasy VII now? No, I'd be like, what? I can't look. No, the little blocky, cute, almost chibi looking characters. I'm like, no, I can't do that. But if it was the remake, then yeah, I most certainly could play that.
I mean, it's not like I just went back and started playing it again.
Yeah, who would do that?
Yeah, there's so many games, and you make an excellent point, Blue. I think all the games that when you played them, they were at the right time. And there might have been some games that weren't at the right time that you go back and you're like, I didn't want to play this game. And like, oh, wow, I think this game is fantastic. It's excellent.
Yeah.
So D says, very true. But how about the games that still hit no matter when you play them? They're rare, but do exist. They almost like have emotional support pick me up, if that makes sense. And it does. It absolutely does.
Of course.
I think a lot of times that games that don't require a whole lot of storytelling, because I think you're right, that storytelling aspect needs to hit emotionally in the right space. But if it's a game that you love, like, I know people who are really into like Super Metroid or, Mega Man games and that kind of stuff, where it doesn't require a whole lot of emotional connection, but it's a fantastic game in the way it's created. So I guess I could definitely fall in line with that. Mm-hmm. I just don't know what that game is for me.
One of the games for me is Shadowrun for the Super Nintendo. I absolutely love that game. I have not played that game probably for 8 years. And that was when I beat it. I beat the game. I sat down on a weekend and decided I was going to beat this game.
Did you stream that back then?
I don't remember if I did or not. I think I might have.
Yeah, that just makes me feel really old because you said that was 8 years ago. Oh,
yeah. 2017. 2017 is 8 years ago. Holy crap.
No, it's not. Shut up. Stop lying.
All right, let's go ahead and look at this week's headlines. Game Informer is back, and so is its entire staff. The outlet is now backed by the blockchain developer Gunzilla Games. The developer behind... Nope, that doesn't count. Does not count.
Yes, it does.
Developer behind the upcoming NFT Battle Royale off the grid, which you may recall has been blocked from Steam due to the platform's stance against cryptocurrency and NFTs. The studio also boasts Neil Blomkamp, director of District 9, Elysium, and the upcoming Starship Troopers reboot, as its co-founder and chief creative officer. GameStop, which previously owned Game Informer, shut down the beloved magazine last August and laid off its entire staff after a more than 30-year run. As part of this deal, the new owners have agreed Game Informer will remain an independent editorial outlet operating under an entity called Game Informer Incorporated, where the editorial makes 100% of the decisions about what's covered and how it goes about it without any influence from Gunzilla or anyone else. This revival includes not only the return of the print magazine, but also of years of back content on the Game Informer website, with the team encouraging its fans to revisit thousands of articles. As for the immediate future plans, Game Informer has already got new reviews ready to go, and from today, the site will be getting daily updates again.
Game Informer was the source of gaming content, news, and information for decades, for, like they said, 30 years, more or less. And so to see that it's back with the staff that they had before, it's not just like we're just using the name, that's an encouraging thought. The one thing that sticks out to me, though...
One thing.
The first thing that stuck out to me was, it says here that Gunzilla will have no influence on their writing. That is the owner, right? Mm-hmm. That is who is backing them. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So there is a minute bias towards the games that they're producing, because let's be honest, if they don't have any money to keep the lights on, they're going to be in the same situation they were with GameStop. So naturally, if there is a lot of criticism towards their IPs, you're probably not going to hear a lot about it from Game Informer. I'm not saying that it's not possible, but let's just say if they gave all of their games a 1, right? And everybody who's utilizing Game Informer to make those decisions now doesn't play those games, it's like shooting yourself in the foot.
Yeah, it's 100% biting the hand that feeds you. I think
exactly.
Best case scenario is they just wouldn't cover them. If you don't have anything nice to say, just don't say anything at all, kind of a situation.
But in that sense, though, that's still a bias, right? Because if you're not covering those games, then you're doing it's damned if you do, damned if you don't, realistically.
I mean, I don't know what journalistic integrity counts for anymore these days.
That's fair.
But, you know, when I read this, because remember we talked about Off the Grid several months ago when it released in October. It's an early access. And it was Ninja and Tim the Tatman had these big partnerships with this game to play it. And it's the best new battle royale that's ever come out. And everybody needs to be playing Off the Grid. Yeah. That's not on Steam because it's full of NFTs. So I went on Google and I was like, how is this game doing now? Now that Ninja and Tim the Tatman, apparently their partnership has ended because they don't appear to be making content for this anymore. Even though it was the best new battle royale forever, you know. I was like, how many people are playing this game? How is it doing? There is nothing. There is no information about this game. There's no good information. There's no bad information. It's like it got attention a couple weeks when it launched, and then it disappeared until earlier this week when Gunzilla resurrected Game Informer.
It was a money grab. In my opinion, it was a money grab.
And if they're not making money on this, how long do we expect Game Informer is going to last?
Well, they will make money off of the publication. People will get subscriptions to the magazine. They'll have digital subscriptions and stuff like that people will.
Yes.
That's how you're going to make the money.
But if Game Informer was profitable, GameStop wouldn't have closed it.
Just got a point. I think the overhead is probably way too large.
Yeah.
Or it's going to turn into something like, I don't know, was it Screen Rant or Game Rant, where you're paying by the click?
Yeah, you get a penny a click, and then it's all evergreen content to maximize the number of clicks. I mean, there's a reason that print publications of all types have gone away.
Right.
In the last 20 years. And Game Informer is probably just really fortunate that they lasted as long as they did. Mm-hmm. It's tough. It's when the devil pulls the drowning kitten out of the ice and like hands it to you, and then you're like, I don't know how to feel about this. You know?
Ducks in Disguise says they could write an article about how the NFT Battle Royale has a real world gold/cash/cinnamon toast crunch based payout system, and I still wouldn't read about it.
Simon Ashtier says, was Nintendo Power ever accused of a conflict of interest or bias?
Accused, no, but but again, you knew it because it was Nintendo Power, right?
Yeah,
and they definitely had a bias on games. Let's be honest. Reviews on games like Amagon and stuff, and Fester's Quest were always fairly positive.
Oh man, you gotta play this dope new game called Fester's Quest coming out on the Nintendo this fall, man. It's so dope and rad. And then you get it, and it's a complete piece of dog shit.
yeah.
So whether they were accused of it or not may have been our naivete, or it could have just been that people recognized that it was coming directly from Nintendo.
Of course.
So, yeah.
Yeah, this is still Game Informer. It's not Off the Grid Informer.
I think I'm screwed. I think I lose my prediction for this year because I said nothing was ever going to come out with another game that was based on blockchain or NFT.
Well, technically this came out before this year, so it's a gray area.
And I think you did say major studio. We'll have to review the tape. No major studio was going to do something with NFTs, but in your defense, even if we can't actually our way to save your prediction, in your defense, who could have predicted this would happen?
Right.
The Off the Grid studio would resurrect a defunct magazine.
But why Game Informer? Why not something like Electronic Gaming Monthly or GamePro?
Nobody remembers those the way they remember Game Informer. Game Informer was just making editions 9 months ago.
Right.
I beg to differ. I still remember GamePro and Electronic Gaming Monthly,
old.
and I prefer them over Game Informer.
But we're old. We are not the target audience for Off the Grid.
Damn kids. Dr. Lakoa says maybe they were just looking to licky boom boom down.
Game Informer.
Hybrid Divide says GamePro and EGM were superior, but Game Informer back in the day was decent.
Well, it'll be interesting. I do have to say, when I looked up the top 3 new releases yesterday when I was putting together show notes, it was a treat. It was a real treat. I searched new video game releases this week. Game Informer popped up first search result. No more going to Metacritic. And I was like, thank you.
You dropped to your knees and you started saying your thanks.
You're horrible, but I'll take it.
All right, next up, there's just over 1 week to go until the Nintendo Switch 2's upcoming direct presentation on April 2nd. But we've got time for another rumor or two, right? The latest comes from Insider Gaming, who claims via multiple conversations during GDC in San Francisco that Nintendo is planning to launch the Switch 2 in June, roughly 2 months following its direct. This would line up quite nicely with how it approached the launch of the original Switch. Not only that, but Nintendo will supposedly implement a 3-phase plan for its Switch 2 software, with first-party titles getting top priority during the initial launch. Following this, Phase 2 will commence in October, November, and allow for titles from third-party publishers to shine. As part of this, it's said that developers will receive dev kits in June. Finally, the third phase essentially covers the Christmas period, which presumably would allow both Nintendo and third-party publishers to unleash some major titles. Whatever happens, we remain confident that the Switch 2 will play host to a wide variety of games from major developers and indies alike. Whether these come at launch or are staggered throughout the year, we reckon we'll be eating well once the console finally drops.
Reckon.
I reckon. You reckon we'll be eating good?
I mean, this totally makes sense. The bread and butter of Nintendo for a very long time has been their first party titles. Mm-hmm. It's what typically draws people to buy the console. No one was buying the Wii U for anything other than first party stuff. The Switch eventually, but again, the sellers for that were all first party titles. And if you look at the top sellers, they all are as well. I think like Mario Kart is number 5 total. And then like all the others are Marios and Zeldas. So naturally it just makes sense. I get that. Let's front load at the beginning with all the cool stuff that's going to be coming out. And then because it's a console that can handle third party developers, which typically Nintendo hasn't, done a great job with. Let's bring them in for August, September, October timeframe. I get that. The fact that it's coming out in June is a little surprising to me. Typically, a new console doesn't come out in the middle of summer. It's usually beginning of fall or end of fall to get ready for Christmas. But then again, if you're coming out with bangers for your first title, like Mario Kart 9. People are going to buy it. There's going to be that FOMO when it comes down to it because all of their friends are buying it.
Of course. And Nintendo has done a great job with creating some banger titles that give you that, I gotta go out and pick these up. I absolutely have to go out and pick these up and play them and talk with my friends on the internet about it and even play with my friends on the internet with this game. Mm-hmm. So my hat is off to them in that regard.
Yeah. I mean, it's a very specific plan to be just complete bullshit. So there is probably a fair amount of truth in it, I bet. And most of the other rumors of the Switch 2 that have come out the last several months have actually proven to be pretty darn true. The Switch launched in March. So I think PlayStation and Xbox released towards the holiday season, but apparently, as always, Nintendo doing their own thing. So it is difficult to think of the console launching with no third-party titles at all. And it's also weird to think that no other developers would have dev kits yet for it.
Right.
Those things I don't quite buy. And so I was looking up the Switch launch titles, and they had stuff from Ubisoft, from Activision, Konami, Yacht Club Games, but none of the stuff you'd really think would be heavy hitters for a launch title. You've got Ubisoft's there, but with Just Dance 2017. Konami's there with Super Bomberman R. Yacht Club Games are there with Shovel Knight, which was out long before 2017.
And was on the Wii U. So maybe they are just going to say the first couple months, it's only our first party titles, as weird as that sounds, but they're Nintendo.
Right. Well, with how popular these games are and how long you can actually get out of these content or the games that they release, does that make sense for them to release it now in June and say, we have we'll release 5 games now. We still have other 5 games that are still in development, but we'll release a handful of games now. And by the time that you get done playing these games, a couple months have passed. Well, then it's time for another couple of games. And by that time, they've held you over sufficiently to give the third-party publishers or developers enough time to come in and say, hey, here's our game for your console. Here you go. We'll go ahead and release it. Now the library starts stacking up.
It's a big risk, though. If your first-party titles generally Nintendo first-party titles appeal to a wide audience.
Right.
But they don't appeal to everyone. And so in that sense, it seems like it would be prudent to have as much variety among your launch titles as possible, as opposed to gating it and saying, no, you're going to buy Mario Kart 9 or nothing at all.
I think one of the things that they're looking at, though, from a demographic standpoint, is that your average gamer who owns a Switch buys it for first-party games. So they got to figure out a way for you to switch from the Switch to the Switch 2. See? And so if there isn't enough reason to make that switch, it's not going to happen. So I think their biggest focus is coming out with those big hitters to begin with. Mario Kart 9, maybe Splatoon 4.
You just got Splatoon 3 not long ago.
I was probably 3 years ago.
Has it been
and
that
7
long?
years between the first one and the second one.
It is true. That is true.
Oh, wow.
But see, here's the first party launch titles for the Switch. You had Breath of the Wild, Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. And then you had 1-2 Switch, very popular. And then you had Snipper Clips.
Never heard of 2 of those games.
Right. So that was the entirety of the first party games that were the launch titles for the Switch.
And one of them was already out on the previous console.
Right. They're going to have to do a hell of a lot better than that. And Hybrid Divide says Splat 3 was 2 years ago.
There you go.
Okay.
But that's the one advantage of that game and Mario Kart 9 would be that it's multiplayer, so you can play it every day, right? Rather than having it being a single player campaign. Yeah, sure, you can throw hundreds of hours into Tears of the Kingdom, but the idea is that it needs to be something that's evergreen that you're going to play every weekend, every day, whatever.
Yeah, if it's not something of the breadth of a Legend of Zelda, Breath of the Wild kind of a thing, you're going to have a tough time tiding people over months and months and months with snipper clips.
Right, snipper clips. And I don't even know what kind of game snipper clips was to even say that I wouldn't be playing that for months on end.
I think it was a little co-op party game type thing.
Oh, well, then screw that.
Yeah, I don't. That's my best guess, but
Grundle knows.
All right, Puzzle Batter says maybe they have been given some information on the basic requirements and have game ideas and are ready to turn into Switch 2 games. I don't know enough about animations and coding. Makes sense, but I agree. I mean, that is definitely a possibility. I would imagine that, yeah, they've been given the specs, and a lot of those companies are probably just looking at games that they were never able to port to the Switch that they'll be able to port to the Switch. Of course.
So you're going to see a lot of those games that are already in existence that, like you just said, they were not feasible to run on the Switch, but now they are. So it's like, hey, you've got to switch to, or like we know you may not have the Xbox or the PS5 or whatever, but hey, you want to buy the Switch too. And guess what? That game you want to play, it's right here. So come on over.
And Simon Ashtair makes a really good point. I wonder if they'll have Pale World on there.
Hybrid Divide says, I'm sure the Switch 2 launch will be better than the Switch 1. Remember, third parties weren't sure about how Nintendo would do coming off of the Wii U. That's good point.
Very true.
All right, next up, after copying Smash Brothers' homework for Multiverses, its recently axed platform brawler, Warner Brothers Games was apparently turning to Mario Kart next. According to Sacred Symbols podcast host Colin Moriarty, via someone once associated with WB San Diego, the studio was working on a Mario Kart-style racing game codenamed Moonlight. Project Moonlight's roster of drivers would come from Warner's wide array of IP, including Adventure Time, Tom and Jerry, Scooby-Doo, and more. Moriarty was apparently told with his source claiming that the game was built in Unreal Engine 5 and boasted stylized graphics. The project was hit with various setbacks, including consistent staff rotations and disagreements around whether it would launch as a free-to-play or paid title. Towards the end of development on the project, all console versions were apparently dropped from the launch plans, with the team hoping to port the PC version at a later date. Moriarty's sources also mentioned that there was quite a lot of animosity internally from people that worked on the game who felt that it was profoundly unfair that their sister team, Player First, got to launch Multiverses twice while they never got a shot to launch at all. But Mom, she got to do it twice. Why? I can't. It's not fair.
Why is everybody trying to come out with a kart game over the last 5 years? Why is it that all old school IPs need a kart racer?
They don't. But
they don't.
You know the answer to the question. You know why they're doing it. Because Nintendo is so damn successful with it. So they want to get on the bandwagon. They want a piece of that money. And they think, Warner Brothers thinks that just because of their extensive catalog and character catalog, that people will come running and flocking to it. Oh, you've put Doc Brown and Beetlejuice and something like that in here, and it's going to work. No, not necessarily.
The thing about Mario Kart that makes it great is that it's simplistic and it follows a formula, really the same formula that came out on the Super Nintendo, right? And it's exactly what you expect. Its multiplayer is very well done. And they're really focused on the game and not the characters necessarily.
Right.
Yeah, they add characters every once in a while, but that's just like fan service, where a lot of these kart racers are just so focused on taking that formula and like, let's make it even more intense. Let's figure out a way to differentiate ourselves from Mario Kart. But that takes away from the overall fun of the game if there's just too much complexity. And it's too focused on the characters' IPs. It's a fool's errand in this way to try to emulate what Nintendo does. I mean, you see that too with like Splatoon when they came out with like foam stars, right? Let's try to create a Splatoon version of it. Multiverses, let's try to create and it's again, they're so focused on let's copy again Nintendo's homework, but we didn't write down how we came to the problem, so we don't really understand it now.
Speaking of foam stars, is that even still around?
No, they shut it down. Nobody Nobody cared. So, I mean, you're right. There's a lot of companies trying to do kart racers, and the ones that jump immediately to mind was the horrible Nickelodeon kart racers, which got 3 entries.
3.
And then there was Disney Speedstorm, which is the free-to-play kart racer, which it sounds like this is what WB was trying to do. And so I looked up what's the player count of Disney Speedstorm, and Steam Base, for what it's worth, is the only one that has a number that I can find, but it says there was an all-time peak of 7,675 players on Steam.
That could be an entire town.
I mean, you're right, Ryan. The thing about Mario Kart is they have had 30 plus years to iron out and perfect this formula. And you can't just come in and think you're going to copy it, but not really, and somehow capture the same spirit and magic. It's a lot more than just throwing characters on a little cart and say, go drive in a circle now for 3 laps. Okay, so Frank says, I want a Gamers Week podcast kart game with you 3 and the patrons racing it out, and the tracks would be based on the different channel names in the Discord.
Oh, that's dangerous.
A little bit. The Horny Jail channel will be an unlockable.
Premium DLC.
Oh no, here comes Blue out of nowhere like the Yeti from Ski Free.
That will be my special attack.
Yeah, nice job, Simon.
Does it seem like the kart genre has never been able to successfully be replicated, whereas other things have been, like battle royale games and pretty much every other genre has been, everybody's been able to do something different and be successful at it, except for a kart racer.
Because I think it's the simplicity of it. And if you copy exactly what Nintendo has done, people are going to be up in arms that it's
complete ripoff.
The same it is. It's the same thing. So you have to differentiate it in some way. And by doing so, you ruin the experience. You make it too complex.
Well, I think Mario Kart has hidden complexity to it. I think that is part of what is magic, is it's simple on the surface, easy to play, difficult to master.
That's it. It's easy. It's the barrier to entry is low.
Right.
Right. You can just play it and have fun. Go through the single player campaign on 50cc and have a blast.
Of course. Yeah.
Just don't play online competitive.
I just thought of something, and I want to bash my own brains in. It could be an NFT car that only you could get, and because of how well you're, I shouldn't
Off
be
the
doing
grid,
this.
kart racers.
And last on the docket, Shadow of Mordor's revolutionary Nemesis system was actually created as a weapon against secondhand sales, according to a former vice president of Warner Brothers Games. Holy crap, they're in the news again. In a video documenting her time with Monolith, former WB Games exec Laura Fryer noted a drop-off in sales for Rocksteady's Arkham Asylum release had been attributed to users playing the game, then returning their copy to a retailer where it would then be sold as a used copy. While this buying and reselling was a boom for the likes of GameStop, it was a disaster for the developers because they weren't getting paid for every game. They were only getting paid for the first copy sold, Fryer said. They lost millions of dollars. So the question was asked, how do we create a single-player game that is so compelling that people keep the disc in their library forever? We knew Monolith's game engine wasn't yet capable of having a fully open world like a GTA, and this team wasn't interested in going the multiplayer route. But we still had to solve for the constraint, Fryer said. And this thinking is what led to the Nemesis system, arguably one of the most creative and coolest game features in recent memory. Despite being an incredibly popular and innovative mechanic, the system is now locked away by a Warner Brothers patent until 2036, following the shuttering of Monolith earlier this year. The Nemesis system was set to be utilized again in Monolith's Wonder Woman game, though that project has now been canceled alongside the studio's closure. And I don't know if I'm familiar with the Nemesis system.
Nemesis? Sorry.
That sounded eerily like Bobby Boucher or something from Adam Sandler.
I was trying to do the Genesis from Star Trek, but clearly didn't do it well enough for you to recognize.
Simon Ashter says, how do we make a game that's compelling? shouldn't that be part of every pre-production? So the Nemesis system, this is probably not quite an accurate description of it, but the way I remember it is in Shadow of Mordor, they were just a bunch of NPC orcs. And depending on how you fought them and how you chose to approach them, the programming would change the orcs. They would get stronger and become bosses based on how you interacted with them. And they would essentially be your nemesis now.
So AI.
As you progress through the game. And so it was a way to customize and personalize the gameplay each time.
Okay.
A gameplay mechanic where enemies remember and react to the player's actions, creating a dynamic and personalized experience with unique procedurally generated enemies.
I would say I much prefer a company taking this route because let's be honest, this whole concept of games being sold back to, third-party retailers that can resell it as a used copy has been pervasive since the beginning of gaming. Yeah. And I remember certain companies were making it so that if you stuck the disc in your system, it was only your system that could use it. And that was a way in which they were trying to tackle that. So it basically, bricked the CD from being able to be used by anybody else. Even like companies like Nintendo back in the day went after rental companies because of the same thing. Well, only one copy is being bought and everybody's going after that. So it's a problem. I get that. But I think that if you really understood that marketplace, you would know that and plan for, we're probably not going to make profit on every single person who plugs this game into their system. So I prefer this. I prefer to have it where it's trying to create an in-game element that's going to captivate you and continue and make you want to keep playing. But the fact now that it's locked away, this sucks. If it truly was that great and it was that fun and that exciting, I'm sure someone else can emulate that in some way and try to make sure that they're not violating the patent by doing so. But still, if you got something that is lightning in a bottle and it's not going to be available until 2036 because you f***ed up your entire studio by making really poor choices. Yeah. That sucks.
I mean, you're correct in saying that most companies try to combat this problem with all the wrong reasons. And this is probably reason number one why eventually there will be no physical games anymore. Because you sell digital games, there's no secondhand marketplace. The problem solves itself. But I really respect Monolith for saying, how can we just make the best possible game ever to where nobody tries to resell this? And I'd be really interested to hear if it worked or not. Because most of the time, I think people will sell back bad games just as much as they'll sell back good games. I think that the people who do that, they'll be like, man, I loved this game. Next one, please. And take it back to GameStop. And I don't think it has anything really to do with it. So I'd be interested to hear how well this worked.
You have those people who have no emotional attachment to games or anything like that. They beat it, they complete it, and they're like, okay, I don't want to continue to play this game. I've felt all the feels I've needed to from this game. Let me move on for the next best thing. I mean, if you look over here and see all the games that I have, I can pick out a game and go down a nostalgia trip at any single point that I want to. But there are some people, and there's nothing that you can do that's going to change how these people play their games.
And I think what they're trying to do, and I think that the whole concept is, let's take that supply of used games away from the marketplace to try to convince somebody to buy a new version of it, because the person who bought it, even if they don't have an emotional attachment to it, wants to continue to play the game because it continues to be a challenge, right? Because I think eventually too, you get so OP in a game that it's just not fun anymore. So to have it grow with your talent and your equipment or whatever, you're not going to put 20 hours into it. You're going to put 200.
Simon says the year $100 GTA 6 comes out is the year my backlog finally sees the light of day. I think a lot of people agree with that.
Yeah, but not as many as you probably think.
Right.
Yeah.
I think people will rage about it and buy it anyway.
Begrudgingly.
I can't believe you're charging me $100 for this.
Yes, I will take the collector's edition.
And print my receipt. Print it.
And the thing is, if it's a really good game, they're going to go on social media and get that like high because They said it's really good and people are going to like it and they're going to get that dopamine rush. If they hate it, they're going to go on and trash it, get the dopamine high, and
everybody wins.
I'm going to put wins in quotations.
They're not going to trash it, though. Everybody's going to love it.
Winning.
At $100, but...
All right, and now let's move on to our top 3 new releases for the week.
First up, Inzoi. Am I saying that right? Inzoi. All right. Every life becomes a story. Create your unique story by controlling and observing the lives of Zois. Customize characters and build houses using Inzoi's easy-to-use tools to live the life of your dreams and experience different emotions of life created by its deep and detailed life simulation. Next up, the first Berserker, Kazan. PS5, Xbox Series X and S, PC. In this hardcore hack-and-slash ARPG, the player will become Kazan, the great general of the Pel-Los Empire, who overcame death. And set out to reveal the incidents that led to his downfall while seeking vengeance on his enemies. Engage in unforgettable boss battles, which each foe presents distinct attack patterns, exploitable weaknesses, and unique abilities. Striking 3D cel-shaded graphics, bringing the world of Arad to life with the vibrant look of animated films. Would you like to be my first Berserker? All right, and last up is Atomfall, PS5, Xbox Series X and S, PS4, Xbox One, and PC. A nuclear disaster has left an area of Britain in tatters. Atomfall, a new first-person survival action game, will see you explore, scavenger, craft, barter, and fight your way through beautifully recreated scenery in search of answers. So, Blue, we're going to start with you because I think over the last 2 months, you have killed my dreams about a game that I sounded really excited about, and you're like, well, actually, the reviews have come back and it's shit. So we're gonna start with you.
All right, so starting with Inzoi, which is fancy Sims, basically.
Yep.
Hyper realistic Sims. I've never been into the Sims games, so I wouldn't be looking at this to begin with, but the reviews of Inzoi are not great. They're like, it's just kind of soulless compared to the Sims games. So depends on what you're looking for. You want to, do pretty dress up with your characters and go to parties and whatever. You might
That's
love
what
it.
Ryan wants.
Yeah, I think Ryan wants to have a little Zoe dress up doll. And
Who doesn't?
You don't know me.
So the first Berserker Kazan, cel-shaded action RPG, kind of a Souls-like, kind of a boss rushy type game. It looks cool as hell. I'm all in for this. This is the kind of gameplay that I love. And then Atomfall, like I wanted to say it's like British Fallout, but it has a different vibe to it altogether. Imagine Fallout was not kind of like tongue-in-cheek humor. It's more like, I don't know, horror, I guess. Both the first Berserker and Atomfall are getting good reviews. But I watched a couple of the trailers for Atomfall, and I don't know if they're just trailers that aren't really representative of the game itself, but they just kind of, they didn't really look like much of anything to me. So of these 3, I'm going for the first Berserker.
Very nice. Donnie, what about you?
Did he just say making? Blue hit the nail on the head when she said Inzoi was basically a fancy Sims. To me, it's Sims married, Second Life, and had a baby. And I tried The Sims, and it was not me. It's basically having a more advanced Tamagotchi. Trying to keep the thing alive and happy and going to work and doing all the things and all that stuff. And I was not into that at all. And when Second Life came out, it was supposed to be like, this is the virtual reality. You can be whoever you want to be. And it fell flat. So I have no desire to create a character and have them go through their own life and be happy and miserable when I'm still trying to manage and maintain my own. So no, thank you on Inzoi. I cannot decide between the first Berserker Kazan and Atomfall. However, I'm leaning more towards Berserker because it's a hack and slash with RPG elements. Mm-hmm. And I'm getting more into these because I've been playing Elden Ring and I didn't want to like Elden Ring, and I like Elden Ring. I really like Elden Ring. Adamfall looks like it looks like a Fallout clone. So maybe I'll check that out. Maybe I'll even go back and play like the Fallout, not the first two Fallout games, but after that, where you could it's an open world exploration. But Adamfall, I just don't know. There's really nothing. There's no oomph, or there's no pizzazz that's really drawing me in.
That's what I'm saying. The trailers were kind of plain.
Yeah, exactly. But the first Berserker looks interesting. Love the artwork. So I'm interested to see how that plays out. And I think possibly I'm leaning more towards first Berserker.
Of course, yeah.
What about you, Ryan?
So Inzoi reminded me of like the first iteration of Roy the game from Blips and Chips from Rick and Morty, right? Where you play as a character going through life and like getting married and, partying with friends and going through life as it is. I think this game is really intended for somebody who hasn't quite gotten to that point in their life that they've experienced all those things. Because I have no desire to like go back and relive the old days of just doing life, So I think this is probably going to be really popular with tweens and teens. Sure. But for me, this is absolutely a no-go.
They can make their Zoys look just like Billie Eilish and Taylor Swift and go to parties, and it'll be the best thing ever.
Absolutely.
You totally tricked us, Ryan. I thought you were going to be all in for Inzoys.
I like to keep you guessing, keep you on your toes. Yeah. The first Berserker Kazan looks super good. I mean, all the rays have been traced with this game. Graphically, it's gorgeous, right? And it definitely seems like like a God of War, a Monster Hunter-esque type game that is just so dark and foreboding, and all of the monsters that you're fighting are enormous, and it looks super, super fun. I did see that GoldenEye said it has to do with blocking and parrying. I'm not always a huge fan of that mechanic, but considering the epicness of the game, it may be something I can get used to, or I can, be okay with moving forward. Which brings me to Adamfall. Adamfall's an interesting one because I got vibes of Fallout, but I also got vibes a little bit of BioShock, which,
Okay.
I've only played the first one and played it for, probably a quarter of the game so far, and I really enjoyed it. I thought it was super fun for BioShock. So it was that kind of experience that I would like to emulate again. So, I mean, there's definitely a curiosity for Adamfall. The fact that it's getting good reviews probably is a good sign as well. So I would go with both, the first Berserker and Adamfall. They're both interesting. This would be something where I'd flip a coin to say which one would I start first, because I don't know.
Oh, see, I would think you would play the first Berserker first.
Well done, sir.
Let's take a quick break to talk about our sponsor. This segment is proudly sponsored by A Gamer Looks at 40 podcast. The show explores the history of video games through the stories and experiences of the people who lived it. This week's question is, what's your favorite way to play retro games? Let Bill know your answer by sending him a tweet at GamerLooksAt40 on Twitter and Blue Sky. So what are the different ways you can play retro games?
You can play on original hardware, right? You can emulate it. You can download it from a current modern console and kind of emulate it that way. Or you can use one of those advanced modern retro consoles. You can play it on your phone. So it's a weird time to live in, right? Where back in the day, your NES was the only way you were going to play your NES games.
So I'm going to say my favorite way is via online service, like the Switch Online.
Yeah.
Easy. You push the button and you start that game. You don't have to do anything else. You don't have to mess with settings or nothing.
Or blow into a cartridge.
So the pros of that one is multiplayer on games that were never multiplayer.
Yeah.
Which is fantastic. The downfall of that is they get to pick and choose which ones are on that.
Fair enough.
So, yeah. But if one of your favorite games is on there, boom.
Have at it.
All day.
Yeah,
Yep.
that's how I play Dr. Mario every day. Simon Asher says, my favorite way to play is by sitting on the floor in my PJs, scooting up really close to the TV with some sugary cereal.
Yeah. With some Cocoa Pebbles.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I'm talking about. That's a low barrier of entry. Whereas if you're trying to play it on original console, then that game that you love so much might be a $500 game that you can't find, or you don't want to spend $500 to play that game.
Right.
I am an original console purist. I love to play the games on the original console, but I also have the entire library of some of these classic systems on my PC, so I can fire those up and play them whenever I want to. There really is no bad choice here or bad decision. It's just however you want to play it. And I can play any way that I want.
See, Puzzle Better says, I know the popular answer will be original hardware, but the non-blowing on things part of me is like, RetroArch is good once you figure it out. And that's the thing is like most of the time I watch streamers and they're just fighting with RetroArch the entire time.
Right.
So
fighting with RetroArch and then finding an actual ROM file that is decent or works properly.
And I will say I agree. I think playing on the original console has a certain sense of nostalgia, which kind of takes you back to sitting in your PJs in front of the TV super close, right? Mm-hmm. But I find myself more often playing them the way Blue does, where if it's on a modern console, I can download it and play it. And, you get some of those quality of life things that help too. I don't always have the patience now to play a game straight through, but I still want to see the ending and I still want to see how it pans out. So save states, whatever, even a rewind. I'll admit I use it sometimes. Yeah. Because I just don't have time to go, oh, you know what? I'm just going to play the whole game back again because I screwed up this one thing.
Right. Agent Nil says, I think I enjoy setting up these retro devices more than I do playing games on them.
That's a word capable will allow it.
I think there's also a stigma behind emulation where people are like, ooh, emulation because there's certain piracy. But I actually got to get into that for our Gaming History 101. So
what a wonderful segue.
All right. Thank you for coming, students. Please take your seats and welcome back to Professor Rybread's Gaming History 101. And in today's lesson, we'll be taking a look at modern retro consoles and what exactly makes them work and what is the difference between them. It's time for the ultimate, okay, not so much, showdown, FPGA versus emulation. Don't shake your head at me. So the modern era, I would say it's a pretty interesting place for a retro gamer. I love playing games from the past, in case you hadn't noticed. And my choices for doing so are surprisingly vast, right? From downloading ROMs to my PC to play on an emulator like SNES 9X, or using modern consoles that allow for the downloading of games to play on my HD TV, or of course original hardware on a CRT television, or using an upscaler like a FrameMeister for my HD TV, a plug-and-play system that has a finite set of games that plug into either your CRT or HD TV depending on when they were released, and finally purchasing a modern machine that acts like original hardware and allows me to use the carts I own to play my games on my HD TV. Now, the last one has become an entire industry that modern retro gamers have poured their hard-earned dollars in order to recapture the magic of gaming and collecting, but also allows them to use their HD TVs to play and possibly capture card to stream online. So let's discuss the two types of machines in more detail and explain a little bit about how they work. So let's first talk about emulation consoles. Now, before we jump into that, though, I will say that there are plenty of circles in the retro gaming community that would instantly clutch their pearls at the mere mention of emulation. Ooh. It's often seen as being akin to piracy, as most often it's done by downloading ROMs off of a website of questionable repute, and which you didn't pay for in order to have access to entire libraries of games.
If it's good enough for porn, it's good enough for a ROM.
There we go. I like it. However, there are consoles like the Retron 5 by Hyperkin that utilize emulation technology, but require you to own the physical cartridge to play the game, skirting the concerns about piracy. Now, the Retron 5 functions more like an emulation-based system with hardware that reads and dumps cartridge ROMs. Here's a breakdown of how the process works. So when you insert the cartridge, the Retron 5 dumps or copies, because I'm sure some people are giggling, it dumps the ROM data from the cartridge into an internal memory. It does not allow you to play the game directly from the cartridge like an original console. This process allows it to have enhancements, however, like save states, cheats, and graphical filters. Now, the Retron 5 runs a custom version of the open source RetroArch emulator, and meaning it simulates the original hardware using software. Once the ROM is copied, the system runs the game through an emulation rather than directly interfacing with the cartridge. Unlike old consoles that use composite or RF output, the Retron 5 outputs video through HDMI at 720p. And it offers various filters and shaders to improve the visuals of modern TVs, and even provides scan lines like you see on a CRTE, even though it's just a filter to simulate the experience. Now, unlike original hardware, the Retron 5 allows for, again, save states that you can save at any moment, and it supports cheat codes through a built-in database. Now, the console allows you to export and import save files from original cartridges. And lastly, the system can apply fan translations, ROM hacks, and patches directly from an SD card, which means you can play unofficial English translations of Japanese games or modern versions of classic titles. Now, the Retron 5 plays multiple types of cartridges in just one system. It was originally designed for 5 systems: the Nintendo Entertainment System, the Super NES, also Super Famicom, Genesis, Famicom, and Game Boy. But it also can play games from the Sega Master System if you happen to own a power base converter, which was an original peripheral for the Sega Genesis, and they even released a device where you can purchase and play Sega Game Gear games on your system. While this sounds like a dream machine, there are some concerns. Not every game from those consoles is compatible with the system, and there is a slight input lag that is experienced through all emulators, so good luck playing Mike Tyson's Punch-Out or Battletoads. Now, if we look at it from the other point of view, the other kind of platform that we're talking about here falls into what we refer to as an FPGA console. And it was created by companies like Analog. So anything that you see as analog utilizes FPGA technology. And FPGA stands for Field Programmable Gate Array. And that sounds super fancy.
Nerd
alert! But let's actually see how it works, right? So think of the FPGA as a large, customizable circuit board filled with tiny little switches, which are called logic boxes, and wires, which are called interconnects. Now, these components can be configured to act just like the original parts of an old console, such as a NES or a Sega Genesis. In the context of a video game console, these logic boxes perform various tasks, such as processing graphics, handling input from the controllers, managing sound. And each logic box can be programmed to handle a specific function, similar to how, different parts of a team have their own role. That's what we're looking at on the circuit board. Now, the wires inside the FPGA connect to these logic boxes kind of together. So if you think about that, it's essentially strings between different sections of the team, right? As we're going along. This allows them to kind of share information, work together seamlessly, and allows them to eventually work together for a common goal. Now, these components connect the FPGA to the outside world. So they receive signals from the game cartridge or digital game, depending on how you interact with it, or send outputs to the television or the monitor. Now, this way, players can see the graphics and hear the sounds of the game. Now, to make the FPGA function as a specific video game console, developers actually had to write code that describes how the original hardware had worked. So this code is written in a special programming language called HDL, or Hardware Description Language, and includes details about how to replicate the console's behavior. Now, after writing the code, it's transferred into a specific set of instructions that tells the FPGA how to configure all the logic boxes and interconnections. And this is basically creating a blueprint for building the outlines where everything should go. So the configuration is then uploaded to the FPGA device. And once it's set up, the FPGA can operate just like the original console, processing the game data and producing outputs that looks and sound just like it did on the real hardware. So when a player inserts a game cartridge, loads up the game, the FPGA processes the information in real time. It mimics the original console's hardware and allows the game to run smoothly and accurately, just as if it was being played on the original system. Now, what's cool about FPGAs is that they can enhance kind of the retro video game console output to 1080p resolution. And it uses a combination of upscaling techniques in digital processing. So, when a classic console is being used, it typically outputs a video at lower resolution, such as like 240p or 480i, depending on what you're looking at. And an FPGA can be programmed to take these lower resolution signals and process them to improve their quality. The way they do that is it involves kind of interpreting the original video data and preparing it for higher resolutions. So it can perform a technique called upscaling, which I'm sure you've heard that term before. What that is it increases the resolution of the image by adding extra pixels to the original image. It does this by utilizing algorithms to determine how to fill in those extra pixels. And the aim is to maintain the visual quality and clarity of the original game. Now, these algorithms, what they do is they kind of analyze the color, the patterns of the existing pixels, and try to create new pixels to blend within the original ones. Now, common techniques also include bilinear and bicubic interpolation. Yeah, I didn't know that term either, which help create a visually appealing image that has a little bit more detail. Now, there is one aspect to it, though, is that most of the games that we played back in the day had a 4:3 ratio aspect, right? And most of our TVs now are 16:9. So by utilizing those algorithms, it allows them to fill in some of the spaces that allow it to become 16:9, or in the event that it wants to create a true experience, it'll create those like side boxes that we see, right? So it doesn't fill up the entire screen. So a lot of kind of things to take into account with these two. We've got two different options, more or less. One that has a little bit more variety, one that definitely gives you the same experience. So that really begs the question, which is better for retro gamers? And honestly, the answer really depends on what you deem important, right? So do you want to be able to play the game at the same speed and performance as the original game? FPGA is probably going to be your choice for that. Do you want save states? Do you want to make your gaming experience a little less frustrating? You're probably going to go with an emulation like the Retron 5. Do you want access to multiple console systems in one system so you don't have to buy a couple of $200 to $500 consoles for each system that you own? Again, the Retron 5 is probably going to be your pick. But if you don't want to be limited to 720p resolution and you want to make sure that you're 100% sure that every game that you put in there is going to work, then again, FPGA is probably going to be the route you want to go. So to quote the knight from Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, choose wisely.
Well, and you also got to think about some of the older games that had slowdown when you played them, when all of the different sprites on the screen like that. Do you really want to play at that speed? Sometimes it helped.
It's like R-Type? Oh, absolutely. Super R-Type. You kidding me?
That needed UN Squadron. I needed all the help I can get with that game.
Right. But the thing is, too, you're going to get that same exact experience, right, if you have an FPGA. Yep. And you know what? It actually might be worse with an emulator, depending. But again, it just really depends on the system itself. But yeah. So kind of wrap things up, in this golden age of gaming, I think the player and the collector alike have a lot of choices on how to play their games. And I, for one, am actually pretty pleased that this hobby has been kept alive from devices just like this. And it will ensure, in my opinion, that these games are enjoyed for generations to come. So thank you for attending today's Gaming History 101. And just a reminder, if you have ideas for a story you'd like to hear, send us a message at gamersweekpodcast@gmail.com, and we might feature your suggestion.
Now, I've got a suggestion I'll mention right here on the show. What about the Super Nintendo's actually overclocking over time?
So just like increasing?
They're getting faster.
Okay. I can definitely do that.
Like I read about that briefly last week, and I was like, oh, so you've got some Nintendo consoles like the Wii U that completely go bricked if you don't turn them on, but the Super Nintendo, it's just
keeps getting better and better.
Yeah, man. Is it the best console ever?
It's aging like a fine wine.
No cosmetic surgery.
Ramboski says, awesome Gaming History 101, Professor.
Thank you.
Yay. Well, on that note, let's go ahead and wrap up this wonderful episode. Thank you for listening to episode 158 of Gamers Week Podcast, and a big thank you to the Retro Game Club Podcast, Love Retro BTW, A Gamer Looks at 40 Podcast, and Pixel Pond Production Company for sponsoring this episode. Don't forget to check out their links in the show notes. If you want to connect with Gamers Week, follow us on Twitter and Blue Sky at Gamers Week PC. Watch us right here on Twitch at twitch.tv/Gamers Week Podcast, where we will record live every Wednesday at 8:30 p.m. Central Time. You can email us at gamersweekpodcast@gmail.com. You can visit our merch store at gamers-week-podcast.creator-spring.com. Or if you want to do it the easy way, follow the link in the show notes. And last but not least, join us on Patreon at patreon.com/gamersweek. And finally, since you've made it all the way to the end of this episode like a good choose your own adventure, please leave us a rating and a review to let us know how we did. We really do value your feedback. And while you're there, consider subscribing on iTunes, Spotify, or your podcast platform of choice.
And now I have to go on with this knowledge of what Grundle really is.
Grundle love.
My whole life is different from here on out. I want you to know this.
Oh, man, we need to make that an emoji, though, for the show. Grundle love.
Please do it with one of the little troll characters from the My Little Pony movie, please.
Grundle love.
That would actually make me so happy.
Can we get your sister to change her Patreon name to Grundle Month? Or Grundle Hunt, whatever it is?
Probably not now.
Good night, everybody.
All right. Good night.
How do we know you won't harm us? We thought you were some kind of monsters.
Grundle's good.
They still look like monsters to me.
Is what everyone thinks. But Grundle's not monsters. Grundle's good.
Grundle's good, Grundle's good, Grundle's good. Grundle's small. Grundle's nice.
Grundle's also quite concise.
Grundle's don't waste words.
Wasting words for the birds. People stunned, often scared.
Eating Grundle's unprepared. Grundle's unmisunderstood. Grundle's neat. Grundle's gentle.
Grundle's sweet.
And sentimental.
Grundle's hug you, never bug you.
Grundle's good, Grundle's good, Grundle's good. Grundle's misunderstood. Take a shot. Grundle's quite good.
Grundle's not.
As we're painted.
Grundle's love all. And above all, Grundle's good, Grundle's good, Grundle's good. Grundle's good, Grundle's good, Grundle's good.
Welcome to Gamers Week Uncut.
Welcome to Gamers Week Uncut.
Welcome to Gamers Week Uncut, patrons with benefits. This is the unscripted, patron-only bonus cast with less editing and more dirty jokes. We don't know where the conversation will go, but we're sure it will be weird.
This fish just went right on my nipple, and I'm just like,
I Google Street Fighter 6. The first search result that comes up is people think they can see Ryu's in the Street Fighter 6 reveal.
Listen up here, kids. You're not going to want to get one of those VD STDs things, right? Make it fall off. When you go, grab a pro. You'll be doing it for America.
that was perfect.
If you want to hear weekly episodes of our patron-only bonus cast, join us at patreon.com/gamersweek.